our chairman of the board.
Buenas tardes. Welcome everybody to this very, very special day. I don't know how many of you have not been here before, but welcome to Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. Today we're going to be on a day that the weather feels like we're in Cuba. We are in for a very, very special program today. I'd just like to preface it by saying I had the privilege of visiting Cuba twice on missions led by one of our board members, Murray Simowitz and his wife Cookie, where we visited Jewish communities throughout the country to offer them support and to let them know that there were people who knew they were there and cared about them. And on both of those trips, actually, I had the privilege of visiting Santa Clara, a city more in central part of Cuba, and met a very, very special gentleman there who you'll be hearing from. And people ask, why is our Holocaust Center having a program about Cuba, or Cuban Jewry? I'll tell you why. When I was there, we visited the Jewish cemetery in Santa Clara, and the entire Jewish community from Santa Clara came out to be with us, with Murray, Cookie, my wife, and myself, and the entire community is about 25 people. And they do a wonderful job maintaining the synagogue, maintaining the cemetery, but also they have built the most incredible Holocaust memorial that I've ever seen. The most moving memorial. And take a look at the poster, it doesn't give justice to it. And the reason they built that is because as the Jewish population of Cuba dwindles, and David will be talking to us about that, the Cuban people are fed so much anti-Israel stuff and don't understand what the Holocaust is all about, whatever. And you'll be hearing today from Murray and Cookie and David about what they have done to educate the people in Cuba about the Holocaust and to help generate greater understanding and to do something about this terrible antipathy towards Israel as promoted by the Cuban government. But most importantly, when we left any community that we visited in Cuba, when we met with the small number of Jews who lived in those communities, they always left saying, don't forget about us. Remember that we're here. And that's what we want to talk about today. Remember there is a Jewish community there. They're trying to maintain their customs and their institutions. And because of the work that Murray and Cookie have done, and David Tacher, they are learning more and more about the heritage and about the Holocaust, which is why we care so much about it. So I'd like to just thank a few people who helped make this program possible today. I'll start with the food. I'd like to thank Hero Restaurant in Port Washington, the Cuban restaurant in Port Washington, that donated the refreshments we had today. I'd like to thank our staff, Judy Vladimir, Tracy Garrison-Feinberg, Beth Lilac, Cara Gion, Larry Carignano, and the others who have worked hard to put this together today. But most of all, we have to thank three people. One is a very, very important board member of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, Yolanta Zemecka, and you'll be hearing shortly from Yolanta. For those of you who don't know Yolanta, Yolanta is a Polish Catholic woman who's been on the board of our center for many, many years, far before I got involved. and does so much work for us and everything. And she made a trip to Cuba to help create a Holocaust memorial, a Holocaust exhibit in Cuba for Cuban people. And she'll be talking about that. But then we have to talk about Cookie and Murray Slumowitz. Murray is a longtime board member of the center, and Cookie's involved with lots of our activities and all the supports that we do. And they're the ones who have supported the exhibits down there. They're the ones who have brought people to Cuba. They're the ones who have the main linkage to the Cuban Jewish community. And we are so grateful for everything that you do. So I want to thank everybody who made the effort to be with us today. If you haven't been here before, I urge you, after the program is over, take a tour of the building, go through the museum, you'll get a sense of what it's about, and hopefully you'll come back and we can see the rest of the building. You're in a 103-year-old mansion. The room that you're in now was the ballroom of the mansion. The band used to play over there. It's a very, very historic building. Our Children's Memorial Garden out there is also very historic, and we can talk about that. But today we really want to talk about Cuba. If you want, when we're done, pick up one of these cards outside and fill it out, and that'll put you on our mailing list so you'll know what's going on here. And again, appreciate and welcome you all here today. And now I'd like to turn the program over to Murray Slumowitz.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a little bit bigger crowd than we really expected, but we're so thrilled that you're here. Our experience in Cuba has been one of a very loving one, and I think when you go there, you'll find it as loving as we do. So, how did all this begin? In 1959, Cookie and I decided to go to Cuba. Of course, Castro decided to dispel with Batista, and we were there when that was happening. Nonetheless, we fell in love with Cuba and said, we're coming back to Cuba. Well, some years later, at our 50th wedding anniversary, we met a guy named Eddie Levy, who is the head of Jewish Solidarity in Miami. And he arranges tours from the United States to Cuba for the Jewish community. And Cookie and I said, that's it, we're going to Cuba. We took our family, children, our grandchildren to Cuba. And on the way of our tour of Cuba, we went to a place called Santa Clara, and we met David. And we were all very excited with his enthusiasm of trying to keep a Jewish thread alive in Santa Clara, Cuba. His many accomplishments, we will tell you about that later. But certainly, we asked him about the one question we always ask when Jews go wherever we go. Is there anti-Semitism in Cuba? He said, absolutely not. But the Cuban government is pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. And every day, more and more, there are things that are anti-Israel. And so the Cuban people never got to see much about the Holocaust. Cookie and I looked at each other and said, we're going to do a Holocaust exhibit for Santa Clara and for the Cuban community. And off we went, back to New York with this great enthusiasm to try to bring to Cuba what really happened. And so back in New York, we got Yad Vashem, we purchased brochures like this, and we had it put together here in New York. The aunt of Zemeckis had her contact with a wonderful printer who put them together, and we had some 30 pieces, would you say, to bring down there. Well, just remember, no U.S. mail going at that time, no FedEx, etc. How do we get it down there? And so with that part of the story, I'd like Cookie to tell you about how we did that.
Well, as Murray said, we couldn't mail them. We couldn't mail anything. With the help of Jewish Solidarity, Eddie Levy, every time he had a group coming, he would give them some posters to smuggle in to Havana so that it would be there when we were ready to go. Sure enough, 5 months later, everything is ready. Murray, Yolanta, and I are at Miami International Airport, and we're all excited about what's happening. We get our visas, we get our license, our religious license from the U.S. government to allow us to go for 7 days. As we get through security, we're at the gate. The customs agents are all interviewing everybody who's trying to go to Cuba. So we are one of the last people to be interviewed. Our young interviewer really doesn't know what to do with us. Should he let us go? Shouldn't he? So please wait. I have to get my supervisor. In marches the supervisor. Immediately realizes that Murray is the head. And she walks over to him and says, "What's your purpose?" Again, he goes through the fact that we're doing this Holocaust exhibit. It's there waiting for us. We only have these posters that we're bringing. Her response is, "You can't go. The Holocaust is not religious." And Murray said, "Are you Jewish?" And of course she said, "No, of course not." He said, "Then you don't know what it means to a Jew, what the Holocaust means. We are getting on that plane." She said, "We can fine you up to $50,000 and/or throw you in jail if you go." Murray said, "We're going. Come on, girls. Get on a plane. It's waiting for us." Off we went, down to Havana. He gets settled there, run to the Patronato, which is the main synagogue where the opening was. And I'm going to ask Yolanta to please continue with our story.
Well, the story for me was fascinating because this was, as Steve had said, I'm a Catholic from Poland, and on the plane, Murray was giving out to us pins. These pins were from Jewish Solidarity, and they were going to whisk us through passport control and customs. I look down at this pin, and what I see is the Star of David. When I pinned the Star of David to my jacket, I stopped being a Polish Catholic from Warsaw, Poland in 2003, but a Jewish woman in Warsaw in 1940. All the information that I had learned about the Holocaust just came flooding in. This is what it felt to be singled out, and this was a positive situation, but to be singled out for no other reason but for being Jewish. Once we landed, we checked into our hotel, and the next stop was the Patronato. As Cookie had said, the Patronato is the Jewish community center in Havana. Our job was to hang the show. I, with a number of volunteers, went to work. Cookie and others went on a hunt for material to drape some things at the Patronato. By late afternoon, we were done. The exhibit was up, and now the finishing touches. Now, I am somewhat responsible for creating this children's memorial garden here at the Holocaust Center. Flowers have always been an important factor in my life. I could not imagine an opening without flowers. Cuba is a tropical country. Flowers should be in abundance. Well, not so. Cookie and I spent almost an entire day going from one florist to another, trying to find fresh flowers for the opening. The flowers that are sold in Havana in the forests were artificial. I wanted fresh flowers. I was on a mission. Fresh flowers were only for hotels and public spaces. I even spoke to the manager of our hotel if he could perhaps lend us or sell the flowers. He said he could not. Disappointed, we're coming back to the Patronato, and I see a man walking with a bucket of gladiolas. I yelled out, "Stop!" this is a mission. You have to understand, I jumped out, I think even before the band completely stopped, with the guide, and I asked, how much? And he understood for one flower. I said, no, for the entire bucket. And he gave us a price, it was under $10. And I gave him $20, and I said, can I please buy the bucket? He said, no, sadly, it would be very difficult for him to replace it. So here we have about 24 or more gladiolas. And for those who don't know what gladiolas look like, there they are. And we went to the patronato, put them in the sink with water, and then once again, Cookie and I are on a mission now to find a vase. Well, the vases are all for small amounts of flowers, maybe 3 to 5 at the most. We went from one store to another, trying to figure something out, and then I remembered that in my hotel room, there was a large waste paper basket. Well, now we have to smuggle it out. So, we smuggled this waste paper basket out, lined it with a garbage bag, and we had the most beautiful flowers with a makeshift vase at the opening. The opening was a great success. We had about 500 people attend the opening. Cubans, Jews, but mainly non-Jews came to this opening. We had foreign dignitaries. We even had the Ecuadorian ambassador to Cuba, who happens to be Jewish, who has friends in Great Neck, and comes to Great Neck quite often. We had a congressman from Massachusetts. But to me, which was memorable, was we had a brigadier general from Israel and a colonel from Israel, who we met earlier in the day. And when they found out that I was from Poland, they both sang the Polish national anthem to me in entirety. But the most important person there was David. David was this all-inspiring, intelligent, and with quiet dignity. And really, he's the one that we were allowed to make this trip. We made this trip, and now we will hear David's story.
So you see, I had a heck of a team to work with, huh? By the way, just how many of you are Cuban or have family from Cuba? Would you raise your hands, please? Thank you for coming. It was my pleasure a long, long time ago to meet David. Inspired us to do what we did. And we are always pleased. I must tell you, he stayed with me on this trip. He had his first bagel ever. He had salmon. Never had that before. And we went to dinner last night, and he had turkey. He had duck, which he never had before. So this morning I wanted something that he's never had before again. Pancakes. So let me introduce to you my friend, and Havana I call him my comrade. He has a long, let me just find, well, I have a story to tell you, John. The story's not his, but I know something about David. He is the leader of the Jewish community of Santa Clara. Oh, sorry. He is the leader of the Jewish community of Santa Clara. He has inspired himself to be involved with the Cuban government in religious matters that affect the Jewish community. He is an economist by education and by profession. Of course, he's retired at this time. He has been involved in many international programs for the Jewish communities in Mexico, has been on the March for the Living in Poland, and has traveled extensively on behalf of the Cuban community. I had so many more details to tell you about my dear friend, but I need to tell you only one more thing. He's my dear friend. And he's going to speak to you in Spanish today, and we have with us a lifesaver, Rafael.